the first episode of Back to School with PC, a fun podcast for teenagers where we interview a host of guests from across the world about their growing up years, their paths to success, and interests outside of work. In our very first episode, we have Rohan Bakshi, an alumnus of IIT Bombay and INSEAD Business School. Rohan's a management consultant by profession, but it's his interests outside work that truly capture who he is. He's the creator of JungleBabbler.com, where he shares all his wildlife escapades from the jungles of Africa to India. He is also an award-winning wildlife photographer whose photographs have featured in Nat Geo, among other platforms. Today, we have him on the show to talk about his school life, wildlife, and other causes close to his heart. He's also going to take us through a series of his photographs and talk about their backstories. Welcome, Rohan. Glad to have you as the first guest on our show.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here, being the first guest on this wonderful initiative that you started. I mean, I think it's great to, share your stories and actually interact with the students. And I believe it's a wonderful opportunity for me and as well as for the students to interact with people, not only me and but the other peers that you will be eventually be getting on the show. So thank you again, yeah, for having me here, man.
Okay, so let's directly jump into the first question that I have for you,
Sure.
which is where did you go to school and how fondly do you remember your school days?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I was born and brought up in Shimla, right? So the school I went to this convent school called St. Edward's School that was based in Shimla. And it was one of those very typical kind of convent schools, boarding kind of schools that you see in the Bollywood movies and all, right? It wasn't a boarding school per se, it was a day school, but had those very similar vibes. You had this strict principal, used to call father. Then, our teachers were very strict, very focused on English speaking, very disciplined kind of scenes. And it was a boys' school, so, pros and cons of being in a boys' school. And then, at the same time, there were these fun activities that we used to have in school, like school fests, extra currics. So it was a very, different kind of vibe that I very remember very fondly because, living back in the hills, going to school early mornings and spending time with those friends which you make at on in your life and then spend the next 10 to 12 years with them. It's a very happy kind of memory looking back. And yeah, for that reason, I'm pretty fond with my time back in school.
Perfect. So nice that you've given us a background of your school and your school days. So I have a follow-up question for you. So given the choice, would you want to go back to your school days?
So, I mean, let's say it's a mixed kind of a response. I mean, for me, I mean, like for every student, right, there are some great memories from school and there are some memories you'd want to forget. Luckily for me, I would say that the good memories have kind of overweighed the bad ones. So honestly, yeah, I would love to go back to school, but I would like to kind of do some things differently, perhaps. One particular thing is the way I, learned in school. I mean, I was learning a lot for the exams and it worked okay for me back then. But, back in school, nobody really, like, the teachers used to tell us, what to learn and what to remember. But nobody really told you how to learn and how to make it fun. I mean, things are slightly different today, perhaps. But back then, yeah, probably how to learn was a tricky element. And now I would like to go back and learn things differently, make, learning more fun. Perhaps we can talk about this later in a little more detail. But yeah, I think I would go back, do things slightly differently.
Okay, so as part of this question, you did mention that you have some favorite and not so favorite memories from school. Could you speak about that?
All right. So for the favorite part, it would definitely be the extracurriculars. I mean, you make amazing new friends in school and those friendships last a long time. And then when you're doing these activities with those friends, I think they kind of stay in your memory very vividly. A particular memory for me was going to this inter-school league in a different city with my friends. So our school, we went with a contingent of like, I don't know, around 50 odd students. And we were out of our homes for a week, just the friends and away from parents. So a very different kind of feeling back then, being away and doing things on your own. So,
Yeah.
and in a different city. So I think that was definitely one of the memories I remember very, very vividly. Enjoyed that part a lot, and everything that came with it.
Okay.
As far as not so favorite memories go, I mean, it definitely has to be the days before any of my exams are. I mean, I remember, being up all night before my history exam or a biology exam, trying to cram through books and, making sure that I remember the Rs and the Ds, everything.
Yeah.
And it used to be pretty stressful, I would say, honestly. So, yeah, and that's why I say it probably needed to change the way I learned. But yes, definitely the exam days are definitely.
I think most people can agree with that feeling of studying just before the exam and
Right.
not a great feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to do the same. I think, generally as kids, you tend to enjoy your time during school and have fun, and then suddenly exams it. And I don't know, fortunately, unfortunately, the same thing continues, like, right even to, today for most of us. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So now that we've touched upon your school, maybe we can go a little forward and talk about your time, maybe not at IIT Bombay, but just before. Like,
Okay.
do you remember the time when you were preparing for IIT? What do you remember from those days?
Fair enough. So, yeah, honestly, I think, preparing for IIT, it was probably the most challenging, yet the most rewarding goal I've set for myself, I would say throughout my life, because it kind of, set me up to be where I am today. And that is not more so because of, I'm me making into IIT or not, but more because of the whole preparation phase. I mean, you're in class 10, you're enjoying life and everything, and then suddenly you have this goal of cracking one of the toughest exams, and you start preparing for that. And I did so by going to Kota.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it was a very different kind of experience, a very challenging experience. But coming out of it, I always felt that, if I could have handled this challenge, I can handle pretty much any challenge in life.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was fun like that. As a matter of fact, I failed the first time. I gave my IIT in 12th, and pretty much a couple of months before the exams, I had got jaundice.
Okay.
So I messed up all my exams, messed up IIT, IEEE. Back then, there were different exams. Messed up my 12th boards, as a matter of fact.
Okay.
So it was stressful, but then life doesn't really end. I took a drop, continued, and I did enjoy studying some of the subjects like physics. I really, really enjoyed it. So eventually made through, but the whole process itself, I think, set me up for success more than the result itself.
Okay. That sounds amazing considering you decided to take a year off and then give it another shot. So
Yeah.
that's great. So, but even going back to you preparing for IIT itself, did you always want to become an engineer growing up?
So honestly, I wasn't one of those kids who was very far-sighted. I never, woke up and said to my parents, "Oh, I want to become an astronaut or I want to become a pilot or something." I was taking life as a kid, taking it a day at a time. And secondly, honestly, back then you did not really know a lot of professions. I mean, you're holding this session today, plus the students today have a lot more exposure, right? They know that professions go beyond just engineering or medical or lawyers. There are a multitude of professions.
Yeah.
So back then there was that no knowledge like that. So how my engineering happened was, I think, so my dad was an engineer. Both my elder brothers are engineers. My all my cousins I can think of are engineers. So I think, I mean, it seemed like a natural progression for me, and I did enjoy physics a lot back then and even today. So that is how gradually I moved into engineering without even me realizing that I was doing that.
Yeah. So it basically runs in the family then.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, too much engineering talks at the dinner table for us.
Yeah, so you did do your civil engineering with IIT Bombay, right?
Yes, that's correct. That's correct.
So can you help our audience understand what is it about civil engineering that you like, and also what is civil engineering all about?
Okay. So yeah, let me explain, shortly what civil engineering is, because a lot of people, when they think of civil engineering, they think of just pure construction of buildings and, contractors trying to figure things here and there.
Right.
That isn't really civil engineering. It is the engineering. I mean, it goes from the design to the construction to the maintenance of pretty much any and all infrastructure that you see around.
Okay.
And for that, it's it's not just about buildings or roads or highways, things like that, but when you talk about design, you need to understand the soil conditions, you need to understand the environment around it, you need to understand the geology, so as to say. So it's a broad subject, and then once you start developing some niche, you might develop it in, say, a soil engineering or in structural engineering or in transportation engineering. It
Mhm.
breaks down into all these different kinds of engineerings. And yeah, but broadly it's going right from design to construction to maintaining any infrastructure that's around you.
Okay. That's a great answer there. And maybe if we move on a little more
Mm-hmm.
and figure out how it was for you to hold your first job, and what was the learnings that you got from the first time you started working.
Okay. So, guys, I started my first job in oil and gas in a company called Schlumberger. I won't go into the technical details of what the job had, but let me talk about the first day and the first few weeks. So, I came out of IIT Bombay, studied for 4 years of engineering, and I knew that I thought, like, I knew my stuff. I mean, that, oh, I've done all these fancy studies and everything, and what could a job possibly throw at me?
Yeah.
And I go there, and it's my first day on the field, and there's this machinery that my supervisor he sent me to fix something in the engine, something very basic, right? And I went there and I was like super confused. I'm like, okay, this wasn't taught to me in my 4 years of engineering. And every day it was something like that. It could be about people or it could be about what we were doing. And, my biggest learning from those first week and since then on was that perhaps all that you study covers 30% of what you do in the job, but the
Mm-hmm.
70% of it is pretty much new stuff and things that you learn on the job.
Yeah.
And basically what that means is that learning, it never stops. I mean, you can't be like, okay, I've done my school or I've done my college and now I don't have to learn new things. Even if you don't want to, you will have to. So might as well make it fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway, especially for our students, that learning
Mhm.
never stops. So, the material of you passing from school or from your undergrad degree, if you get an
Right.
engineering as well, you still have to go ahead and keep learning every
Right.
day of your life.
I
So,
mean, look at both of us, right? We were
yeah,
doing our MBA and learning last year, and the jobs that we are going to do are things that we never done before.
yeah,
So
true.
probably we'll be learning again. So yeah, it just won't stop.
I think that mindset is very important, like you mentioned.
Right.
So there's something interesting about what you did with your career. So you
Mm-hmm.
started working in a
Mm-hmm.
job and then you decided to start something by yourself.
Right.
So
Right.
can you talk a little more about your entrepreneurial journey? What were your learnings there?
Sure. See, entrepreneurship is essentially, starting your own company,
Yeah.
and it's the experiences there are very different from working in a job, and being different, actually, are very rewarding. I
Yeah.
mean, think of it as like one of the students in your classes, right, who is interested in music, and then he decides that he'll form a music band in his school and they'll participate in competitions, and he starts from scratch, gathering people around, forming that what kind of music they want to play, and then doing all these sessions, organizing them, and eventually ending up playing at, say, some competition and winning.
Yeah.
So the feeling that that student would get, that starting something from scratch and seeing it through, being like that project being your baby.
Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship is exactly like that. And that was exactly how I felt, making a company and building products and doing things, something that I really enjoy doing. And as much as fun the journey is, I think it's very rewarding as well. So I had like an amazing time back then. Like I'll always remember that time. And if I do get a chance again, I would love to start something again.
Okay.
Definitely.
That sounds like a very cool career path as well.
Definitely. Like,
so now that we've got a great understanding of your background, let us move towards the fun stuff, which is wildlife. So
right.
let us, I mean, it would be great if you can help us understand what is your connection to wildlife. Maybe if you can recollect the first time you've taken a picture and if you can describe about it.
Okay. So the connection with wildlife and, photography. So photography came in a bit late, I would say. When we were kids, we were generally interested in, visiting national parks. And as a matter of fact, even Shimla, right? It's pretty much at the boundaries of forest. It is a forest, the hilly forests back there, right? So we were always in the midst of wildlife. And that is what got me interested into it. And like our parents used to take us to Corbett National Park and all of these places. So that is when the interest grew.
Okay.
Photography was a separate thing. That interest grew very separately. I mean, back when I was a kid, we used to have those film cameras. This might be like alien talk to the students today, but we had this film wherein it could have 36 pictures in it. And then you gave it to the studio, they would process it, you'll get back the pictures 2 weeks later. You have no idea what you're clicking. So photography was hard then, but a different kind of fun. So our dad had given us one of those cameras. It was called Hotshot. It was this narrow, thin thing, right? So I remember the first vivid memory of me clicking pictures was, I think I was in class 3rd or 4th and we were visiting Taj Mahal.
Okay.
So, and I was clicking pictures of Taj Mahal. I had no idea what I was clicking. Our dad was like, listen, you have 36 pictures for the entire trip. Be very, miserly about it and make sure that they still last. And I clicked pictures. We came back, couple, and then we gave it for, printing and all.
Okay.
Got back the pictures. Honestly, like 70% of them were pretty bad. There was my thumb in front of the camera lens. There was, I don't even know where the camera was pointing, but a few of them did turn out okay, which I still have back at home today.
Yeah.
And I was like, I can do this thing. This is fun and I don't want to do this more. That is how it started. Yeah. And I continued more and more abstract kinds of photography in college, participating in random competitions, trying out new cameras. And then eventually wildlife photography started for me back in 2017.
Okay.
Yes. So I was visiting this park called Kanha National Park. And that was the first time I saw a tiger in the wild.
Okay.
And the first time I saw a leopard in the wild. It's a very interesting story about that as well. And perhaps you can get that into that if you have time later.
Yeah.
I saw them and I clicked their pictures. And when I saw them later and I, saw these wild animals in their habitat, walking towards me, staring right at me in the camera and having those memories, I could like it. I got a hang of it. I was like, okay, this is something that I really want to do. And then, there was no looking back.
Okay. So interesting. So it's 2017 that you first got into wildlife photography.
Yes, I was into photography since a kid, but wildlife picking up a genre happened in like 2017.
Is there a lot of difference between shooting wildlife against taking a picture of a human? If so, can you help us understand what the difference is?
Sure. So see, Prakash, the main difference that I feel is that, you can control humans, but you cannot control wildlife, right? Yeah. So, you can tell a human that, okay, stand here, look towards the camera, or, look away from the camera, give me a candid pose. Or you can tell that person that, okay, the light is good here, the light is bad here, let's do a shoot in the morning, evening, inside, outside. You can fix lights, etc. You can't do that with animals, right? I mean, they have their own way of doing things. Like they want to come out at a certain time, they will come out at that time. They want to sit in the shade, they want to walk past by you, past by you. They don't really care about, is this making for a good picture? You
Mhm.
need to figure that out. And I think that's the best part about wildlife photography, right? The uncertainty, and yet you trying to capture that moment and its natural essence. I think that makes wildlife photography very different from, say, human portraits.
Mm-hmm. So maybe I have a small follow-up here.
Sure.
So if I have to think of you clicking a tiger in the wild, so for
Hmm.
you to get that perfect picture, how
Hmm.
many days might it take you to get one?
I mean, it takes a lot of days and a lot of practice, I would say, because see what happens is, you know, when the tiger eventually comes out, so you're spending a typical jungle safari lasts from anything from 3 to 6 hours, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're lucky, maybe in 2 to 3 safaris, you'll get to see a tiger once, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And with all that anticipation, when you finally see the tiger, in that moment, the adrenaline, it goes crazy.
Yeah.
So it takes not just the window is very small, but it also takes a lot of calmness and patience when you actually do see the animal you've been waiting to see.
Yeah.
And sometimes it happens that yes, they come out in the right time, the right light, and you get wonderful shots. At other times it's more about pre-planning, wherein you make your vehicle stand in a particular place and hope that the tiger walks from this way or that way so that you can get the perfect shot. It's more about planning rather than and then being calm when the moment actually happens.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds very different from asking a human to just strike a certain frequency.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Why do you think it's so important to preserve wildlife? Like you hear to it in the news and then you hear about it in a lot of different places. So can you
Right.
explain to our audience why it's important to preserve wildlife?
Sure, sure. So, see, Prakash, the thing is that, when you look at planet Earth, things might seem very haphazard and, happening very randomly. But when you study it closely and look at it closely, planet Earth, it maintains a very precise balance. You've seen a
Mhm.
weighing balance, right? So it needs to be balanced on both sides to stay stable, right?
Yeah.
And what we humans have done over the past centuries, and particularly after the Industrial Revolution, is
Mm-hmm.
that we've tampered with that balance a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And what that has done, the effects you can see in terms of, you might hear these words like global warming or polar ice caps melting and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So all these are effects of us tampering with that balance. We were doing it before that, but Industrial Revolution just put that tampering on steroids.
Yeah.
So and you know what, the ecology and our environment, it forms a major part of that balance.
Yeah.
So, what preserving wildlife does is basically two things, and it's two reasons why it is important.
Mm-hmm.
The first is to bring back that balance. Essentially, when you're preserving wildlife, what
Mm-hmm.
you're implicitly doing is bringing back the ecological systems that were there to maintain that wildlife and bringing back the habitat that was needed. And
Mm-hmm.
in doing so, it essentially means reforestation, or
Yeah.
it means maintaining the polar ice caps and things like that.
Yeah.
So you are, in a way, bringing back that balance that you disrupted.
Okay.
And the second important part is, just like we had the right to enjoy the beauty of, nature, the elephants and the blue whales and the polar bears and tigers and everything, I feel that the future generation has the same right.
Yeah. True.
We should not take that right away from them. So
Okay.
that they should be able to enjoy that wildlife and everything that the nature has to offer just as we could. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that is what makes preserving wildlife even more important.
Yeah. I totally agree with you on both these points, but maybe we can jump a little more into the first part of your answer that you mentioned
Hmm. Hmm.
about global warming. So
Right.
global warming is such a broad term. Can you help our students understand a little more about what global warming is and why is it so important an issue that we today have to be cognizant of?
Fair enough. And you say global warming is a broad term, honestly, and we'll get into that. It is a subset of something even bigger, and we'll get into that. So, essentially, see, what global warming basically means is a rise in Earth's temperature. That is what it means, plain and simple. Now, how it happens again is because of the disruption of the balance. There is, for our students, I'll just give a quick overview. So, there is something called greenhouse gases, and carbon dioxide is a major greenhouse gas. There is methane as well. But what greenhouse gases do is they store heat, they capture heat, and they don't let it go away from the Earth's atmosphere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, before the Industrial Revolution, there was a good balance in the carbon dioxide being produced and then being converted into oxygen. Now, after Industrial Revolution, this side of the balance, it kind of went up, wherein we started to produce more carbon dioxide because of burning fossil fuels, which is for, our cars, our aeroplanes, our industries, then for electricity. So this side went really up on the scale.
Mm-hmm.
On the other side, how carbon dioxide converts into oxygen is through the plants, through a process called photosynthesis. It must be in the course of your students. So what photosynthesis does is converts the carbon dioxide into oxygen, in which way plants get their energy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, again, what has happened is after humans have started to, spread across Earth, they've started doing more agriculture, more cities are being built, etc. So the forests have declined. So the plants that were turning carbon dioxide into oxygen, that side of the weighing scale has gone really low. So this difference has created excess amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, which results in excess amount of greenhouse gases, which results in increasing in temperature.
Yeah.
Now, typically what happens is you'll see a lot of people say that, oh, you talk about global warming, but look at some XYZ city where it snowed in the Sahara a couple of years ago, something like that happened, right?
Yeah.
It's snowing, the temperatures have fallen down. Our city, it's cooler, so much colder.
Yeah.
So that is why I think it's important to look at a bigger picture called climate change. Global warming is a part of climate change. And, with the Earth's balance, the thing is that if that balance is tampered with, it will result in this butterfly effect, wherein the winds will change, the water currents will change. So that will result in change in climate in general. So just because of that increase in temperature, you could have floods somewhere. Like right now, there are floods in Assam going on. You could have droughts somewhere, like it happens in Maharashtra right now. You could have the things that we generally talk about, the polar ice caps melting. So all these things start to happen just because the temperature increasing. It does not mean it will increase everywhere. It means that it will change climate everywhere that we're not used to have seeing across generation and across years in India, across the planet.
Yeah. So this definitely sounds like a very big problem that the future generations are going to face. So
Yes.
is there some sort of advice that you can give to our students on how from their side they could actually work towards decreasing global warming?
Sure. So see, I told you about the two sides of the balance, right? And what the students need to do is look at both the sides.
Yeah.
So what can we do to reduce the carbon footprint? So, for students, do they have the option of, coming to school on a bicycle instead of in a car? Can they walk to school? Is it a possibility?
Yeah.
If not, can they share cars between friends? Ask the parents that one parent drop 5 students.
Yeah.
Or even better, if they can take a school bus.
Yeah.
Things like that. Then in terms of electricity, when I was a kid, my maid used to come in the morning, switch off the fan and the AC, and I would be like super bothered that let me sleep in peace.
Yeah.
But these small things, they actually accumulate in the overall picture. So maybe, you know, when you're leaving a room, switch off the light, switch off the AC, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds that it's a very small thing to do, but India has a population of 1.4 billion people, right? So if we collectively do it, the impact goes big, and we have to do it one at a time. So
Yeah.
perhaps do these things on this front. And on the other front, you know, have a plant, you know, and just put a vase in your study table or at the window, grow a plant.
Yeah.
Do that. Maybe on weekends, go with your parents and plant some trees in the garden, in your community garden, things like that. So
Mhm.
bring back the trees up and bring down your carbon footprint in small, small ways. And I think collectively that can really help the future generations.
That's fair. Like everything that you mentioned seems things that students can definitely do in their present path. So
Right.
now let's do something a lot more fun. Let's look
Sure,
at
sure.
your pictures, all right? And
Yeah,
maybe you can talk through some of these pictures and how you took them and what they mean to you. That would be great.
yeah.
So just
Wonderful. Let's do that.
a few seconds to share my screen.
Sure, sure, sure. Take your time.
Let me know when you can see it, all right?
Yeah, I can see it now.
Perfect. So what I see here is a leopard. So maybe you can talk a little more about this.
Right. So, you know, this picture very special to me because, and I'll tell you why. So, you know, growing up in Shimla, you are pretty much surrounded by leopards.
Yeah.
And then I went to college in IIT Bombay, which is across Sanjay Gandhi National Park, which is again surrounded by leopards.
Yeah.
And leopard was something I wanted to see as a child. They were always near, but they are so elusive animals, you never really get to see them.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when I saw this leopard for the first time, I saw this in Kanha National Park in India.
Mm-hmm.
It was me waiting to see a leopard for 27 odd years.
Okay.
This is when I saw a leopard for the first time.
Yeah.
That is why this picture is so special to me. I mean, look at him like looking right back at me, walking towards me. And, you know, these are the kind of moments which get you into wildlife photography. The whole sense of, you know, calm and achievement you feel after, you know, clicking a picture like this or seeing something like this in the wild.
Yeah.
And that is why this picture is like super special to me.
This looks really good. I have a question though, like how
Yeah.
far is the leopard from you? Like it looks as if it's a few feet away.
Actually, it's not that close. It is fairly close, but not a few feet away. I mean, it would, I would say, be around 50 odd meters or 40 odd meters, something like that. So nowadays, you know, with photography, the technology has gotten pretty good. Lenses have come with a good amount of zoom.
Yeah.
So you can zoom in into the subject and get pictures like these, which is something like not possible with, say, a mobile.
Yeah.
But with the new technology, new big lenses, you can get pretty close to animals while actually being at a safe distance away.
Let's move on to your second picture.
Sure.
I see is a lion.
Right. So I clicked this picture in this country called Malawi. I don't know if a lot of people even know about this country. I did not know about this country, honestly, when I went there. When I knew that I was going there was when I found out that this was a country. And this was clicked in a national park called Nika National Park.
So where would Malawi be?
So Malawi is in South Central Africa. It's south of Tanzania.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Good the geography. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, helps, right? So what is special about this picture is that this lion,
Mhm.
it's like, you know, maybe the students would have seen the movie Lion King, right?
Mhm.
It's pretty much like that. This is a fairly young lion,
Mhm.
and it got separated from its pride. We don't even know where its pride is.
Mhm.
And it was the only lion in a park that is 3,200 square kilometers big.
Oh,
Just
wow.
to give the sense of how big that is, Hyderabad is 600 square kilometers.
Okay.
So almost 4 times the size of Hyderabad, and you have this one lion.
Okay.
And when I clicked this picture, till this date, nobody had seen this lion.
Yeah.
So this was the first picture clicked of this lion. And you know what I'm trying to say is that sometimes wildlife photography, it's not just about photography. It's also about these once in a lifetime kind of experiences that you get. Like, this is a story you wouldn't get sitting in your room or chilling at a beach. These are stories you'll get, visiting the jungles, visiting the parks, and seeing this wildlife. And so that is why I think this picture is kind of special.
Okay. And I have another question for you. Like,
Yeah.
why do you think lions need so much space? Like, how is it different from looking at a lion in a regular zoo? Like, what's the difference that you can tell me about?
Sure. So why lions need this big spaces? Because they're predators, right? And they need their hunting area, and it's kind of like dynasties. Like, one lion won't hunt in another lion's area. They need that space. And how it's different from seeing a lion in the zoo or a lion in the zoo. Let me talk about the situation right now, right? Like, our students, they're stuck at home in COVID.
Yeah.
It's a bad, sad situation to be in, right? You cannot step out of your house, cannot play with your friends, cannot do things that you'd want to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, even the students can, I think, feel the frustration. And it's just been 3 odd months since they've been, packed it back in the house. Now imagine a lion who's used to being in such an open space, put in a cage that's smaller than, one of these rooms in our houses.
Yeah.
So imagine the frustration of that lion, the Lion King. I mean, so
Yeah.
it's just sad to have them in the cages when they deserve to be in their open spaces. And it's just changing this majestic animal into a sad being who's just surviving, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great comparison. Like, asking, like, I'm sure that a lot of us can relate to it. The fact that you have to stay indoors and
right.
it's frustrating. So I can only imagine how difficult a lion which is used to staying in a place which is 5 times the size of Hyderabad is asked to like.
Right. Exactly. And for their entire life, right? It's been 3 months for us. They have to spend their lives in cages.
Agreed. So maybe we move on to the next one.
Sure.
So this looks like an interesting giraffe, which is, yeah, maybe
Yes.
talk about it.
Yeah, so I clicked this picture in South Luangwa in Africa. This is a park in Zambia. Zambia is right next to Malawi.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is one of those pictures of mine which, became internet viral and stuff like that. So, and it's because it is this giraffe in a very awkward position, and people generally think it's like throwing up or doing something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But essentially, what this giraffe, the poor guy, is doing is he's drinking water.
Mm-hmm.
So these guys, they have like super long necks, and it's very difficult for them to, bring their head down and drink water like that. They kind of get a head rush. I mean, when you're like spinning or doing some stuff like that, you get these pains in your head. That's exactly what these guys get. So they can't stay down for long to drink water. So what they do is they try to just fill up as much in a second in their mouth and then flip their heads up. So whatever goes in, whatever goes out. So this guy was doing that right now, and yeah, I managed to click it right in that, symmetric spot.
So something like a giraffe, do you think we can spot one in India?
Not in the wild. I mean, of course, there are zoos which I'm not very for, but if you have to see them in their natural habitat, Africa would be the best place to do that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe we move on to the next one, which we are a couple of tigers. So where was this picture?
Yes. So this picture I clicked in Ranthambore National Park. It's in Rajasthan.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually two tiger siblings. They are sub-adult cubs, and at this point of time, they are playing.
Yeah.
So what's interesting about tigers is that they are very similar to our kings and queens of the past, wherein they have their own kingdoms and they have their own territories, and then they kind of fight for their territories. The kings get ousted. There are new queens of the region. So these are two sisters who are currently playing. But as they become older, they start these fights kind of turn into these battles to claim the throne. So it's very interesting to see these animals in the wild and observe them and see how closely related their antics sometimes can be to the humans.
Yeah.
Plus, you need to spend a good amount of time to see something like this in the wild. But if you get to see something like this, it's kind of really amazing.
Yeah, it looks super interesting, and the
Right.
tigers look super playful as well.
Yes, they were. These both are females, and yeah, pretty amazing sighting seeing them play like kittens.
Mm-hmm. So let's move on to the last picture that I have from you.
Sure.
So can you speak a little about this?
Yes. So this was again clicked in India in a park called Tadoba. It's in Maharashtra.
It's actually very close to where our school is. It's about
Oh, is it?
something.
I mean, I would urge your school to kind of do a school trip to this park if you can do that for the kids, because it's important for them to see the wild as well and connect with it. And this is a picture kind of showing that, right? When we think about animals, we consider them as our definition of animals, right? Something that is inferior to human beings. They don't feel, they don't have emotions. But if you look at this picture, this could be any human mother holding her baby and sitting in the park, right? And the baby just sleeping in her arms. And this shows the kind of emotions that animals feel as well, and why it is, really important for us to see them in that light, that animals have emotions, animals are smart. They are not, just animals. And see them at par with us. And once you can see that, you can respect the animal kingdom, and you can understand why it's important to have them around you, and just let them be.
Yeah, and that's fair. Like the first reaction that I have looking at the picture is very similar to a young mother with its infant baby
Right.
of a human as well. Like it's a similar
Right.
I get from it.
Right. And you can see the peace on the baby's face, right? It looks so peaceful sleeping in her embrace. So yeah.
True. So just a second.
Sure.
I'm going to close our sharing. And in the final few minutes, what we want you to do is maybe share some advice for our students. And then we can go on to some audience questions. So
Sure.
Something that our students are pretty keen to ask as well.
Sure. So as far as advice, I actually have two. So we talked about two things during our conversation in general. At first, we talked about learning, and I would want to come back to it. So, my first advice is make your learning interesting. I mean, schools today try a lot with kind of giving experiential learning and then having sessions like the one that you're holding right now, which did not happen back at the time. But, at the same time, you yourself have a lot of control on how you can make your learning interesting.
Yeah.
And let me kind of go through it in a, through a short example of history, basically, of, how human beings back when we were in the Stone Age and we were hunter-gatherers, we still needed to remember things, right? It was necessary. It was almost critical for us to remember things for our survival. We needed to know, which are the roads that we have to go through, what are the animals that are friendly, not friendly, what fruits we can eat, what we cannot eat. And we did not have Wikipedia back then. We did not have Google like maps back then. For that matter, we did not have a pen and a paper to write because writing and language were not there. So how did these people remember things? It was visually. It was through, stories that they had in their mind. And it's not a life hack, it's just how we've evolved that we remember things better visually. Like, for example, if there are 10 things in your refrigerator, if I give you a list of those 10 things, you can remember that, but you'll probably forget. A better way to remember that is open the fridge and look at those 10 things.
Mm-hmm.
You'd probably remember more. Even better way to remember it, open the fridge and think of a story that, oh, I was hungry, I first ate the apple, then I had milk, then my mother made this. And that ways you can, remember things much better. And you can use the same thing in your studies, right? For example, if you have to remember how was Akbar's rule, instead of writing it down 10 times and cramming it up the way I used to do that, right?
Yeah.
Think of it that you are one of those subjects who are like literally in Akbar's kingdom, talking to him, strategizing with him how to increase his kingdom, walking down his kingdom paths, etc. Make it more visual, make it more interesting for yourself. And there are tons of these memory techniques, as to say, and that can make learning really, really, really interesting. So, like we said, right, learning won't stop.
Yeah.
So might as well make it interesting through these life hacks as we know it.
Mm-hmm.
And this, sorry.
Please go on.
Yeah, and the second part is on the environment front we talked about, right? So being students, young students, don't ever think that, the changes that you make are very inconsequential. Speak up your mind and do things, because it is a collective effort that has to be done. It's not just one person doing something or two people doing something. And as kids, you can still attain a lot. I mean, she might have her own critics, but think about Greta Thunberg, right?
Yeah.
She's 17 years old. At the age of 15, she spoke in the UN about climate change.
Yeah.
So children, this generation is the one that can bring change. So never think that you cannot do that. Just go ahead and do that.
Yeah. So I think that those were two really important messages that you did mention.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe if I had more access to visual learning, my marks in social studies and history would have been much higher.
I feel the same. I so feel the same.
And maybe we can end with any recommendation that you might have for our kids in terms of any books that you would suggest that they should read.
I would highly recommend this book called Sapiens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a pretty thick book, so might be daunting at first. But I think the kind of knowledge it gives about human evolution and how, humans have, for good or worse, changed the way how our planet now is, I think it gives a good perspective. And having that knowledge per se is really important for you to know and, be that element of change, that, okay, these are the things we've done right, these are the things we've done wrong. And what can I do going forward to set some things right and probably, fix some wrongs that we've done. So it's a good way of seeing the entire history of how humans are shaped, and gives you some great perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I've read the book as well, and I totally agree with what you said. It gives you a very different perspective from just reading your textbooks, and helps you understand how we definitely have evolved. So it's a great conversation. Listen, it's been a great conversation. I had a lot of fun doing this. If I have to think about the three main takeaways that I and hopefully the students also have had from the conversation, it could be, number one is that you'll always have to be a student throughout your life. The second is around what's the importance of preserving wildlife and the kind of impact it could have on all of us. And finally, the fact that all of us can do our bit to stop global warming in the little ways that we can, and hopefully that would have a snowballing effect and eventually leads to a much bigger impact. So most importantly, other than all of this, it were the pictures. I think our students would really remember the pictures and all the stories behind it. So thanks a lot, Rohan, for being that first guest and like helping us kick off our initiative. And it was lovely having you here.
Thank you, Prakash. I mean, honestly, it was as amazing for me as well to be part of this initiative. It was amazing to get a chance to, interact with the students and answer some of their questions. And I would urge them to reach out to me in the future. Maybe you can share my email ID with them, and if they have any questions. And Prakash, I must say that this initiative that you started, it's very amazing. We talked about this, right? We probably did not have these kind of opportunities when we were growing up. So for the students today, getting to hear from people, understanding things from a different perspective outside school. I think it's an amazing initiative, and I wish you all the luck in the future for this.
Thanks a lot, Rohan. Those are very kind words. So hopefully once the whole lockdown situation is sorted, we'll be able to catch up in person and looking forward to that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely.